would embed some information on the image to say which device was used to capture the picture. Okay. Now the problem is, if you take for example a lens, a Carl's lens, different phone manufacturers would use the same lens. Right? So even if you take an iPhone or a Samsung, HTC, all of them might have similar components coming from the same manufacturer. So it's very difficult to, it's a difficult problem to tackle. Nevertheless, not just each model, each individual device would leave its own fingerprint on image. So what we did, the method actually is not our own method, it's an existing method. We simply use it for smartphones. Other people have used a similar approach for digital cameras. But we work on smartphones because nowadays everyone carries a smartphone. They use a smartphone for taking pictures, not a digital camera. So we use 64 different features based on color, wavelengths, or frequency information, and image quality information. So 64 different features we use. I don't want to go into details about each of these features, but information is there. So in terms of color, average color, etc. When it comes to wavelengths, so this is an image, this is after a wavelength transform. So once we apply the transform, in each of these quadrants, we find particular information. That's the whole idea of using wavelengths. So then from each of these sections, we extract some features and so on. Then in terms of quality, we look at, well, again, so many different features. Is it okay if I didn't explain too much details? That's fine. I'm happy to answer the question. So, 3 different types of features: color, wavelengths, and quality of images. Altogether, 64 different features. And then we train a classifier. In our case, we use support vector machines as a classifier. We use a binary classifier. So the idea of a classifier in support vector machines is we have samples of 2 different classes, and the support vector machine will try to find a good separation between these 2 classes. That's the idea. So when an unknown image comes, we project that image into this, let's say, SVM plane and find where it belongs to. That's in very simple terms idea. So in order to test our method, we created a small database, used 10 different smartphones, took in total 600 images, and from these 600 we created 1,200 more. Okay, I'll explain those. So basically, these original 600, we resized them because we wanted to know, if I resize an original image, could I still identify which device was used to capture the image? Because when you resize, something happens to the image, it loses certain things, but could we still recognize the camera? And then we cropped out. So instead of taking the entire picture, if I only had a small part of it, could I still recognize which device was used? So that's why out of the 600, we took 2 different sets. And our database include indoor scenes, outdoor scenes, natural images, bicycles, scenery, and so on. So these were the devices, slightly old devices, because the work was done now a couple of years ago. We published a paper in ICIP. So these are the devices. In each case, we use the highest resolution. Then resized images were largely between 800 by 600. That's the resized images. And then we randomly took a cropped image of 700 by 700. So this is our database. These are sample images. So we just randomly took lots of pictures on each camera. So this is the original one, and that's a cropped part. And so on, right? So then we looked at accuracy. So this is for individual phones. We looked at the three feature components separately. Okay. Color separately, quality and wavelet all of them separately as well as together. So in general, you can see accuracy is quite high. You'll be surprised to know that just by taking a picture, you can actually know which device was used to take that image. Of course, we have to have some examples to train our system, but those examples were not the same scene, not taken on the same day, and so on. They're completely different images. We found that quality and wavelet features were the most robust. Color was not that good on its own, but combined features gave very high accuracy. And in this case, we had two HTCs, both the same model, but two different devices, and they were correctly identified. So even two models, exact two devices, they were individually separated. This shows what happens if so my train set included original images, and then I'm trying to see if I take a resized image against the original one, could I still identify the source device? The accuracy dropped a little bit, but still I was able to reasonably identify the source device. So from a forensic investigation point of view, even if the investigator can't identify the phone 100%, if he or she can narrow down from 100 of possibilities to 10, that could be very useful in the investigation. So that's that particular project. So I'm going to talk about a number of different projects, and each one of them very briefly. The second one, this is about skin structure analysis. It's related to aging as well as skin cancer. The work was done by Osman, who did a PhD on this. He just finished this year, and some of my colleagues in the computing department, other colleagues in the medical school, and also their collaborating partners from King's and NHS Milton Keynes. I wasn't involved in this particular project, but I thought it would be interesting because I know there'll be staff from medical school and biology. Right. So the idea is, this was an initial study. In order to understand or classify skin based on aging or exposure to sun, at the moment people use a manual scoring method called BG scoring method, and it's based on these images. So here, as a score 1, very low exposure to sun, skin integrity is very high. So you would expect to see something like that on a younger person. Whereas, as you grow older, as your skin is exposed to various natural elements, of course, we lose certain things, unfortunately, and our skin structure degrades. Okay? So even if a younger person is exposed to sun a lot, these things would happen, and then it turns to skin cancer and so on. So typically you do this manually. You look at certain features and you label it saying it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay? So the project they worked on was to do this automatically. So they looked at 2 different features. One method was based on gray level co-occurrence matrix features. Again, I won't go into too much details about the features themselves. So lots of information was used from the image. Basically, you're looking at texture information here. How many lines are there? How closely the lines are grouped together, or are they farther apart, and so on. In very simple terms. And the second method they used was local binary patterns. Again, another texture analysis tool. It's used in so many different application areas. That's local binary patterns. I don't want to go too much detail in this technical stuff. So this is an original image, and that's sort of a texture image based on local binary pattern. So this is what you would use from a computational point of view to analyze that image. And they found a reasonable correlation between what the machine said and what the manual labeling would have said. This is based on GLCM. Of course, correlation is not very high when it comes to GLCM, but you can see when they use local binary pattern information, they found a much better correlation between what the manual system would have said versus the computer would have said. Now the good thing about being able to do this automatically is automatic is done real time, it's cost effective, high throughput. And you can, what they're able to do is take a smartphone, take a picture of your skin and see how damaged your skin is in real time. So you don't have to go to the doctor doesn't have to spend so much time on it, they can work on other important things. So they have shown that you can do that automatically to a reasonable level. That's the second project. Right. The third project, this is myself and my colleague Nasir, we are supervising this project. This is about mammogram classification for breast cancer. So, as you know, breast cancer is the biggest problem when it comes to women aged between 35 and 55. Just in the UK alone, a large number of people are affected by breast cancer. It's a huge problem. Right, so what you do is, in order to detect if there are signs of breast cancer as early as possible, women are screened at a particular age, so they go to the clinic, they're screened, take a mammogram to see if there's something to be worried about. And then there's a radiologist who will go through the mammogram and say, don't worry, nothing there, or they'll say, oh, there is something here, we might need to do further tests, or we might even have to do a biopsy, which is not a nice thing. So these are the two projections that take typically. We work on this particular MLO projections. So we are basically working towards a computer-aided detection or diagnostic system, which involves pre-processing of the mammogram, let's say mammogram. And once you pre-process that image, you extract certain features, then you classify. So you classify a mammogram to say if it is normal or abnormal. If it is abnormal, you might want to know is the abnormality benign abnormality or if it is malignant. So those are the things that you would want your computer-aided diagnostic systems to come up with. So this is a typical mammogram. So in terms of pre-processing, we need to get rid of these labels and various other artifacts. Otherwise, it's going to mess up the computer system. So we need to get rid of these things. So there could be all kinds of labels, noisy particles, and also we need to get rid of this pectoral muscle, because that is one of interest when it comes to the cancer. We need to focus on the cancerous area or potential area here. So our system works by giving an image. We perform some segmentation. It's an adaptive thresholding segmentation. We still have certain artifacts remaining, so we need to get rid of those artifacts automatically. Then we perform some morphological operations, which get rid of those artifacts and noisy areas. Okay. Once we do that, we have the breast area localized, but then we need to remove the pectoral muscle. So we have developed a technique to automatically remove the pectoral muscle. So we end up with an area of interest to work on. So from here, we extract features. So features such as local binary patterns or GLCM, wavelets, and so on. Then we can classify using classifiers such as simple nearest neighbor or support vector machines and so on. So this is an example of an original mammogram, and this is after pre-processing. This is again how GLC works. I don't go into the details of this one. We tested our algorithm on the Minimize database. This is a publicly available database. You can use it if you work in this area. It has about 322 MLO mammograms, I think around 209 normal cases, and 61 or so abnormal cases. So we just did a very simple test. So when it comes to breast tissue, there are 3 types of breast tissue: fatty, glandular, and dense. So we separated each one of them, and then we looked at in each case, is it a abnormal case or a normal case? That's a very simple thing we did initially. So we can see if we use the original image without segmenting, without removing artifacts, of course the accuracy is quite low. But in all cases, once we do the automatic segmentation, the accuracy improves. But this is very early work. Since then, we have extended this work. The student is now writing a thesis. I just didn't have time to put together all the results. So we use many different features in addition to LBP. A new type of feature is called histogram of oriented gradients. We use that and a number of other features. Then we fuse everything together, and actually now our accuracy rate is very high. We are reaching some of the state-of-the-art techniques that are published in international journals. Maybe I could give a talk on this topic alone some of the time. It's just too much talk. Right. Plasma mammogram analysis. The third one I'll talk very briefly is on content-based image retrieval. So the idea here is on multimedia. Say if you go to Google, type someone's name, it comes up with pictures of that person and so on. Of course, it is easy if each image is annotated. So with the image, we put some text information saying this is so and so, picture was taken on this location and so on. So we can search by text. But what happens if you don't have text describing the image? How would you search based on content? So the idea is, if I present an image such as that to a database which contains a large number of images of different things, could I retrieve relevant images? So that's the problem. So ideally, let's say our database has all kinds of images, so elephants, people, food, and so on. But I am presenting this picture, and I want to retrieve everything that looks like this one. So this is content-based image retrieval, and it works like this. I have an image.